All right, so here we go. This is me creating that first timeline, and it's going to be a little sped up, but I'm just going to talk through it normally so that you get the normal viewpoint. So I created a new page, and I'm building a couple of layers here. I'm assuming I'm going to have a separate title header page, sort of the logos. I'm going to have a different layer for each of the different of the Elder Scroll games that I'm working on. So I'm just trying to think ahead. What are the layers that I think I might want? And then go ahead. I'm going to lock all those layers except for the one that I'm going to work with. And so I come in here, I've made a secondary page because my initial thought here is that I might work on each section separately on its own page and then just sort of put them all together at the end. And I'm just building, I made myself a nice little rounded rectangle. I use the corner on a rectangle tool. And now I'm playing with some colors. I'm trying to decide, well, what do I want? We'll just go with a black border, make it a little bigger. And now we're going to add some text. Now, text in Gravit, it obviously starts out small, but we can blow that up using the text appearance box over here on the right. So I just drag that up there, make my box a little bigger. And then I'm just sort of realigning it, center everything. And then I get to play with all these different texts. So these are all the ones that are installed. And you know, I'm just flipping through trying to find something. What looks good? You know, this is all about what is looking good to my eye, rather than what is the perfect text, because you never know until you see it on the screen. Okay, you can think about what you want all day long, but until you actually see it on the screen, you don't know what's going on. Okay, it's forcing me to save, not a big deal. And we'll just sort of blow through this. We're looking at, again, different fonts. We're trying to get a little bit of contrast. Looking at this, I see there's this press start to player, so it's a very classic gaming looking font. And so I've got this duplicate one, and I'm going to go ahead and copy it and paste it over onto this main first page. Okay, because again, right now I'm thinking I'm probably going to have a separate page for each of them. So we look at this, jump over, do a title logo. I've already saved all of these images ahead of time as part of my research. So I grab a logo from the game or one of the logos from the games and start bringing in extra pieces. So I've got my screenshots that I'm zooming in on, and then going ahead and I'm actually taking a rounded rectangle or a cornered rectangle, and I'm using that clipping mask. And now we're going to add a little bit of text. Originally I was going to use text, but then I decided, no, I need to probably go ahead and grab a logo. So I got a logo from out in the world of the original game. And then I started typing because this infographic, once again, infographics are all about presenting information. And while sometimes you can do that 100% visually, a lot of times you're actually going to have to type in words, type in information as to what's going on. So you can see I'm just here typing, and I'm putting together something that I already sort of sketched out on paper. So I had a rough idea of what I wanted to say, but I just sort of typed it in there. And so I looked at the whole thing, and I think, well, it needs something to make it stand out from the background. So I'm going to create, again, a rounded rectangle. You'll notice one of the things I'm doing is I'm using the same basic shape. So these rectangles with their rounded corners to create continuity across the entire project. Playing around with these backgrounds here, trying to figure out what's gonna look good. And I'm limited by that original logo because the words "The Elder Scrolls" in the logo are black. So I have to have something light that will show up against the background. So I take that whole thing, I'm going to group it together um, and make sure it sits in the correct layer. Okay, because once again, I made a mistake. I didn't actually build it inside the layer. Playing with the fonts, playing with the sizes, trying to get it all put together in a sort of a homogeneous way. So I literally just went ahead and I am copying my original piece that I had built. I was having an issue here with it copying the whole thing, not just the outlines. But that turned out to be my crazy because you'll notice that the little button that turns a layer into outlines was clicked. So that's why it kept not looking correctly. And as I go, I finally figured that out. And all I'm doing is I'm going to go ahead and replace each of those individual pieces with the correct one for the second game. So I go and I'm going to release that original mask, reshape the image I have, and mask it again. Drop that in there, and then I can add in the logo for the second game for Daggerfall. And once again, because I'm using the same basic pattern over and over, there's not a whole lot of work. It's just replacing one piece with another. And I don't have to, freak out about redesigning something. And that's really the thing that I want you to think about is if you're using something over and over, if you're using something consistently, well, then you can go ahead and it speeds things up because you're just reusing the same thing. You don't have to design from scratch. You don't have to start over. And that's one of the really nice things is that if you're building an infographic and using the same system each time, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. Okay. So now we get into this next one. And for the Elder Scrolls 3, there's actually a big change in how the system works. So it requires an adjustment in how I do this side piece of information. So obviously I replace the logo. And then I go in and I start adding images because the thing is in this one, there are in fact two different viewpoints that I have to address. So again, I've resized both of my images and I'm going to take them both and sort of center them on a widened version of that background. And because of how that background's laid out, I really wanted it to be centered. So I'm going to go ahead, take these, create my new clipping mask so they're rounded pictures. Do the same thing over here on the right. And now I'm going to sort of position them in just a second here once I finish rounding this one off. And I can position them sort of in center. And that tells me how wide my background piece has to be. And I wanted that center logo to sort of sit in between them so it was visible the whole thing up to down. I didn't get anything lost inside the images or anything like that. And you can tell I'm just using some of the alignment tools to make sure everything's aligned, then group them together and then align them out. And then it's back to typing. So again, this is something that I had written up on paper ahead of time, just like I did my original sketch. And I've put it together and now I'm just typing it in because it's actually significantly different because this is the game that incorporated a secondary viewpoint into the game as well. All right, so just sort of lining that one up roughly where I want it. I'm going to duplicate it. And now I need to go in and I need to do the exact same thing over here for the next game. So now as I work on these last few selections, I have sped it up even more just because it's a duplicate of what we did for the previous ones. And this is just going super fast. Again, same basic idea, changing out the logos, changing out the text, and then making sure everything's centered and neatly organized with the correct spacing and the correct images. And these are all the images that I had found ahead of time and saved. And I made sure to save where I got those from back on my data sheet. So you'll notice this goes real fast. We're just going to blow through this as we work to get these last ones put together. You'll notice here I'm actually duplicating it twice and recopying and pasting because I had one image that was two images together. So I actually did it twice with the clipping mask, which is again one of the greatest things about clipping masks is that it allows you to just take a piece of a larger image if you'd like to. As we work through this last one, you'll notice it is a little bit different. It doesn't have any actual gameplay imagery simply because the game's not out yet and probably won't be for several years at the very least. So as we work through this, you'll have to just sort of, guess on some of these things. If you're creating an infographic that makes assumptions about the future, you will have to take a guess. So we get the whole thing now, and we're looking at alignment and positioning. And so what I'm doing is I'm grouping all of my pieces of information, and we're going to go ahead and try and line things up. You'll notice I'm also going through, I want to create a sense of flow. So I'm taking these backgrounds and I'm adjusting the colors, making them a little darker. And now it's all about alignment. Where do I want them to sit on the page? How can I make them fit in the space I'm working with? And then I need to create some sort of a visual marker that allows me to have the eye flow from one to another. So I decided to do this just with simple arrows. So I draw a line and then I go ahead and I put one of these end arrows on it and just start playing with the styles. What do I think looks good? What do I think is going to work the best? And you can notice as I go, it really is just a matter of trial and error. What looks good? I go in, I'm going to try and match colors. And you'll notice as I go through with all of the arrows, you'll notice that I change the colors of each arrow to match the colors that they're connecting. Again, it's a way to work with the visual flow of your project. So that way, as you go, you're not going to have a disconnect between what your project looks like and how it's put together. Okay, originally I was experimenting here with, do I want straight lines that angle back and forth? You know, how do I want it to be organized? What do I want it to look like? And you can sort of tell it doesn't quite look right, honestly. So you look at it and it's sort of getting lost. Obviously, I'm not worried about where the arrows are in the layer panel yet. I'm just trying to figure out where do I want them to point? How do I want them to arrange? And I determined that I have to shrink down my data sets simply because they were taking up too much of the real estate on my page in order for me to be able to use the arrows in a meaningful way. Okay, and again, duplicating that same arrow so it looks the same. Now adjusting those colors. And again, you can see the color progression matches the same of the backgrounds because I want them to, again, show that color progression, that progress through the artwork or through the program, so that, again, it gives you or gives the reader, again, a sense of what direction their eye should flow. Okay, put all the arrows into their path and then drop that layer all the way to the bottom so it's behind everything. And now it's just a matter of sort of tweaking, looking at what do I like. I decided I didn't really like that arrowhead, so I went in and I started adjusting the arrowheads on all of them. And you notice I could select multiple lines and do it all at once as well. So I didn't have to do that. And played with the end pieces because, again, it's just what looks good, what doesn't look good. So think about that as you go. It's always okay to go back and change things because you don't want to get stuck. Looking at a background, I decided just to put a big rectangle, play with some colors. And again, a lot of it is just thinking through and what looks good. I'm going to put that background at the very bottom because, again, I want it behind everything because otherwise it doesn't make sense as being a background. It just blocks it all. So again, it gives it sort of this background shape or background color. And I'll play with that color a little bit, see if I can figure out what sort of works best with the values I have so far. So I come back up to my title. I decided I didn't really like that. I wanted some sort of a background there. So I like that purple, that sort of royal purple with some white text. And that sort of gives us the basics. Last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add in all of my reference material. So everywhere I got my sources. And this doesn't have to be big, but it does have to have all of your information. So I just copied and pasted that off of my research. Okay. Cleaning it up just a little, but it's just a series of links and websites to where the data and where the images came from. And there you have it. That is the basics of creating this assignment.